A contradiction in terms.
Good evening. I'm Joe Dillon of the League of Women Voters of Linn County, and I'll be your moderator this evening. Welcome to this candidates forum that's between candidates who are running for Marion City Council, the at-large position, and those are Mr. Craig Adamson, Mr. Dwight Hogan, Ms. Mary Lou Pizor, and Mr. Ron Swearingen. And also the candidates who are running for Ward 2, we have Mr. Joe Spinks. Mr. Chris Schumacher was invited, but he was unable to attend this evening. A little housekeeping is in order before we get started. Please, if you have a cell phone, make sure it's turned off or on silent so you're not embarrassed by everyone looking at you when it goes off. And also, if you didn't see the sign, the restrooms are out the doors and to the left by the cafeteria. The League of Women Voters is a non-partisan volunteer group organized at the local, state, and national levels to encourage citizens to participate in government. While we as a group, as a league, study and take action on issues, we do it in a nonpartisan way, not affiliated with any political party. We do encourage our individual members, though, to become active in their community and in the political party of their choice. And despite our name, we encourage both men and women to become members of the league, and you can sign up right over at the table over there when the forum is over. We also encourage you to vote on November 5th. And you've taken a good step here to becoming educated as far as the candidates and the issues. Now, a little disclaimer is in order. The views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates. Sponsorship of this forum is not an indication of support for any one candidate, and all viable candidates have been invited. Okay, there are some instructions. Pro Video is taping the event for rebroadcast. Thank you very much. If at any time during this forum you cannot hear either me or the candidates, please feel free to let me know. We request that you treat all candidates fairly and politely. Please remain quiet throughout the forum. We ask that you refrain from cheering, clapping, making comments, or whatever. But we do encourage you to applaud all candidates at the end of the forum. You're encouraged to submit questions for the candidates, and you should have received a yellow piece of paper. If you haven't and would like one, please raise your hand, and one of the league members circulating around will bring you one, as well as a pencil. If at any time during the forum you'd like to ask another question, or you're finished and you want to have the question gathered, just raise your hand again. Questions must be addressed to all of the candidates, not just one, and must apply to issues or qualifications of the candidates for their particular office. A league panel will review the questions for legibility, clarity, applicability to all candidates, and they may also weed out if we have several questions that cover exactly the same topic. Your question may not be asked, someone else's will. If we run out of time and the question that you wanted to ask has not been asked, feel free to come up and ask the candidates. Okay, each candidate will have a 2-minute opening statement and a 2-minute closing statement, and then 1 minute to answer each question. Opening and closing statements will be done in alphabetical order based upon the office being sought. The timekeeper, who's sitting in the first row, will raise signs when 30 seconds are left 30-second sign. When 15 seconds are left, 15-second sign. And when time is up, a stop sign. Please wrap up, candidates. When you see that stop sign, if you are continuing to talk, I will just say thank you and move on to the next candidate. Candidates will confine their statements and responses to relevant issues and refrain from any personal attacks. So at this time, we will start the candidates forum with the opening statements. Each candidate will have 2 minutes, and I will begin with Mr. Craig Adamson.
Welcome. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Thanks to the League of Women Voters for hosting the event, as well as Kirkwood College. As many of you may not know, this is the home of the Small Business Development Center, which serves both Linn, Jones, and Benton counties. So it's kind of nice to have this little gem in our backyard and use it to promote existing businesses in Marion. I do thank you for taking time away from your families. I know that there's a lot going on tonight. I hear there's a World Series game tonight, as well as, is that tomorrow? Okay, well, there's also a program at the Marion Heritage Center, as well as the library and the Library Levy vote, which I think are some other important things going on here. So thanks for taking time out to spend it with us. Obviously, I'm biased. I think you made the right choice by coming here. Hopefully you've come into this with an open mind about each of the candidates. Take a listen to what we say, listen to our answers, but also be asking yourself, does this person grasp the issues? Do they understand the needs of our community? Are they able to make sound financial decisions? These decisions have lasting impacts on the city of Marion. And so are they capable of working with others to accomplish the goals that benefit all of Marion? Proverbs chapter 4, verse 7 says, "Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding." If I have done my part, you will understand more about what's at stake for this election. You'll also have thought of me, Craig Adamson, as the answer to those questions in your mind each time. However, this forum really isn't about me, it's about you, the voter. This is about what we want for the future of Marion. Not only today, but down the road. The decisions your city council members make have long-lasting effects. Not all decisions have the same impact as the 7th Avenue corridor plan, where we've gone from spending $70,000 of our money to a $50 million private investment in all these buildings that are going up. So thanks for your time, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Adamson. Mr. Hogan?
Yes, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for allowing me to be here tonight and for all of you for coming. I've lived in Marion for 52 years. I'm a 1971 graduate of Marion High School. I'm running to represent people of Marion on the City Council because I believe we must show more physical restraint with our city budget and spending practices. I believe we must have transparent city government, and we must seek input from all residents, property owners, and business owners. The actions of the council must reflect the will of the people. Since 2009, I've been a regular at the Marion City Council work sessions and regular meetings. I've also attended the budget sessions for the years 2012-13 and 2013-14. All of us agree our streets are in need of dire repair, and the city in 2012 bonded $14 million for these repairs. Again, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for allowing me to be here, and let's go.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Ms. Mary Lou Bazur?
Once again, thanks to the League of Women Voters for allowing us to have this session. Pretty much what Dwight has said is exactly what I was going to say, except I've lived in Marion a bit longer than he has. I've taught in Marion. I've been a Linn County Deputy Sheriff. I know the necessities of public safety between the police department and fire department. First of all, congratulations to Marion for being selected as one of the 10 most desirable cities for families, according to Family Circle. The article cited affordable housing options, friendly events for the family, school systems, the amount of public green space, 360 acres of public parks. That's not bad. But Marion can do better, led by a citizen-friendly city council, a council that listens to problems, then takes the necessary action. A council that is more aware of what is being spent, how much is being spent, and who ultimately picks up the bill, which is you, the taxpayer. I've served on the city council for 20 years. I feel I am the most experienced, and I would appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pizarro. Mr. Joe Spinks? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you're correct. I have that order. This is a good time to tell you that I forgot to remind you that when you vote on November 5th, you will have the opportunity to vote for all of these candidates, not just Ward 2 or at large. Okay, Mr. Ron Swearingen.
I'd like to, as well, thank the League of Women Voters for inviting us all here tonight to discuss the topics at hand. I was born and raised here in Marion. When I was a kid, I knew that Marion had a population of 18,028, and we were the 17th largest city in the state of Iowa. And also knew that there were 22 states in the country that had a city named Marion. So suffice it to say, I've always been proud of my hometown. And that's one of the reasons I joined the U.S. Army after I got out of high school. And it's a reason that I want to serve the city now and become your councilman. I think this race is going to be about the future of the town. We're going to need some common sense solutions to the problems at hand, and a council that's going to be responsive to the needs of its citizens. I'd like to thank you for your time, and please vote for Swearingen for a better Marion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swearingen. Mr. Joe Spinks.
Like the others said, I wanted to thank the League for having us out here tonight, and especially for all of you for the interest you've shown in coming out for Marion. How many of you know that Marion has a creed? No one? Well, I want to read it to you. Marion is a progressive city that provides high-quality services which promote an active, safe, and healthy environment, which enables the community to realize the best standard of living possible through cost-effective governance. Now, Kay and Mary Lou.
Mission statement, Joe, not
Mission
creed.
statement. Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you very much. But anyway, Mary Lou and Kay and I were on council when that was made, came up with that. But I think it says very much of what Marion is today. A little bit about myself. My wife Teresa and I have been married 40 years. We're the newcomers to Marion. We've only lived here 35 years, so we're just the newcomers. I've served for 6 years on council. I was appointed to the Ward 2 position when Mayor Linn was elected mayor, and he vacated Ward 2, and I ran unopposed 4 years ago. One of the things that I saw when I first started attending council meetings before I was on council is that there's 7 votes on council, and it takes 4 of those votes to make a decision on them. And so I'm proud to say that I've been on council for these 6 years, and Marion has seen such progressive growth that I just about have to pinch myself when I drive through town. Thank you very much for coming out tonight, and I'm Joe Spinks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Spinks. Now, because you get to have the opportunity to vote for all of these candidates on November 5th, the questions will be addressed to all of the candidates. Each one will have the opportunity to respond, and we'll do that in a kind of rotating order. So the first question will be addressed to Mr. Dwight Hogan. And we get to look into the future for this one. It's now 2020. if every one of your visions and policy issues comes to fruition, how would you describe our community?
For one thing, I hope our streets are drivable. I think Marion is progressive, as everybody has said, and will keep going that way. What great things have happened in our community with the addition of e-plastic and fiber right coming in. It's going to create more jobs. This should help drive our economic and business community more. I look for in 7 years, I think we will be probably at 60,000 people maybe. We have two of the best school systems, and they'll continue to be that way.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Ms. Pazur?
By that time, excuse me, by that time, Marion will probably not be considered a bedroom community anymore. I think with the growth of the industrial area, that will eliminate the idea that this is only for people who live in Cedar Rapids and they come home and enjoy Marion. I hope, like Mr. Hogan does, that the streets are usable, although we have the best street cleaning system in the state.
Thank you, Ms. Pazur. Mr. Swearingen?
Well, I think that by 2020, I think that the city will be a city that's going to continue to grow. We've grown at about a 30% population increase each of the last 2 decades. So this is going to be a town, I think, in 2020 that's going to be ready for those changes. There's going to be a lot of changes. I think driving down the street on 8th Avenue, you're going to kind of see what it's going to be like in the future with a lot more people with the closing of Blair's Ferry Road. And we're going to need to meet those changes and fix the streets that we already have that are crumbling badly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swearingen. Mr. Spinks?
Well, in 2020, one of the things that I would hope Marion would be is that our tax base would not be based solely on property taxes, but rather it would be a 50% residential and commercial. That's important for keeping the taxes low because right now, as I think Mary Lou said, that we are a bedroom community, and that says that just about all of the property tax that is collected goes to pay for the city's activities. When we go to a commercial industrial split to the residential, that shares that burden, and that would allow that burden to weather the storms that we've just seen. So that I think that will be very important in the future to keep taxes low.
That's a good answer. Thank you, Mr. Spinks. Mr. Adamson?
When you're talking about a community and what it's going to look like 7 years from now, a lot of those decisions were made over the last 8 to 10 years, of which I've been on council, the majority of those. Previous to that, 2 years on the Planning and Zoning Commission. What I really see for the city of Marion is an outpost for the likes of Kirkwood with an expanded campus in Marion. Even as a proud Iowa State graduate, I would even welcome a University of Iowa outpost in our community. I think there's that much demand for MBA programs and things like that with our community. There's no reason for us not to embrace higher education as a partner. Additionally, with the Tower Terrace Road expansion, you're going to see a lot of things like you're used to seeing in Ankeny and West Des Moines. There's going to be shopping, there's going to be nightlife, and then you've got a revamped Uptown Marion that is going to blow your socks off. It's going to be pretty amazing, and I hope all of you are around and want to be a part of it.
Thank you, Mr. Adamson. Our next question relates to the library. What is your attitude toward the proposed library levy increase? It's interesting that it was mentioned that there's a meeting going on about that. So this one will start with Ms. Mazur.
I had an amazing first grade teacher whose name was Catherine Cheadle, later marrying Jerry Munn, who was a police officer. And Miss Cheadle was a real bear on teaching people to read. And in first grade, I had my library card, and I was a firm believer in getting books frequently from the library. It is amazing the change from the old Carnegie Library on 7th Avenue to what we have now. I guess maybe I would like to wait a bit and see what impact the new Cedar Rapids Library is going to have. We need an expansion, but it's still, you kind of hate to have all this room and nobody there.
I believe that a lot of the reasoning that they're using to increase the levy is based upon the fact that the Cedar Rapids Library has been closed much of the last 5 years because of the flood, and they've had to borrow a lot of books from the Marion system. They're talking about going from a 4-cent levy to a 27-cent levy, which would be an increase of massive proportions for them. And from what I've heard, a lot of that money is going to be going not into services, but into bringing increased personnel in there and increasing the salaries of the persons that are there. So I do not favor it.
Thank you, Mr. Swearingen. Mr. Spinks?
Yeah, the library has seen a massive increase in the activity it's had since Cedar Rapids downturn and the flood. The volume has increased, and the traffic that we see through there is really, really stepped up. Since the Cedar Rapids Library has opened, we saw a dip in that increase, but it's come back up again. So we've seen that hold steady. Now the Marion Library, if you compare it to other libraries around Iowa, it's like a third of the size, but it has the volume of libraries that are in much larger cities. The problem is that the people that work in it, compared to those libraries, is only a few people compared to those larger libraries. So there is a real need for individuals increase in the library personnel, and then the levy will assist with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spinks. Mr. Adamson?
Well, the first part of it to think about is the fact that the Marion Library moved almost 1 million pieces of material, be it books or magazines or newspapers, in the past year. I don't recall right off the top of my head what our library director has said our usage is on a daily basis, but it's tremendous. And quite honestly, we just don't have enough staff to do everything. That's part of growing. If we're going to be at 40 to 45,000 people, like I think we'll be in the next 7 years, or as Mr. Hogan is saying, 60,000 people by 2020, we're going to need a bigger library, and we're going to need more staff because, let's face it, Marion has a very, very high education level with our 2 schools. We'd be shortchanging our future if we don't really stop and think about what do we value. Do we value education and knowledge, or do we want to save 4 or 5 cents or 20 cents?
Thank you, Mr. Adamson. Mr. Hogan?
You know, you think long and hard about this. You know, you're voting to tax yourself on the levy. That's an individual's choice. I would like to see that what the city survey says after it comes back, I would like to see numbered after we've had a chance for the new Cedar Rapids Library to really get rolling. The library and library board went behind the council's back with their petition. I believe that the council cut their budget a little bit, and that's They wanted to hire people at the time they were having the budget hearings, and the council said, no, we're going to cut your budget. So what they're getting out of this 23-cent increase is the money that the council reduced from their budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Our next question relates to some growth in Marion. What are the prospects for increasing the industrial base in Marion? And for this question, we'll start with Mr. Swearingen.
I think there's a lot of opportunities for Marion to increase its industrial base. I think we'll probably stay with the light industrial base that we have right now. I don't see any heavy industries that would be coming into town, and I really don't think that we would want any heavy polluting industries like that. We do have room along the current industrial corridor to be increasing the amount of industries that we can bring in, and that will certainly increase the amount of revenue that we bring in as a city, and it will help bring in jobs. So I think that the future for growth, especially when you have more people coming in, is going to be anything we can handle. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swearingen. Mr. Spinks.
Yeah, 5 years ago, the Marion Council started what's called now the Marion Economic Development Center. It's located out by the airport. And the reason for that was to attract light industry to come to Marion. And it was just what I was talking about, that will pay back on this to the Marion, their property tax revenue for their homes, that it will decrease, or it will help to balance the funds that are going for home property tax and industry. Get that more to a 50-50 split. When you do that, if you see a downturn in housing, the industry will hold up, or if you see a downturn in industry, the housing will hold up. So it'll be a balanced flow of money into the city. And so I see that as very important for Marion's progress.
Thank you, Mr. Spinks. Mr. Adamson.
As a member of the city council at the time we started the Marion Enterprise Center, I can tell you it was a really big step. What is the role of government? What do we choose to do with our tax dollars in order to make an investment in the future? It wasn't with a lot of thought and some controversy, and trying to work with the development community on coming up with plans that would be complementary as opposed to competitive. As it's turned out, Elplast, this Polish plastics company, will be coming to town and building a multi-million-dollar building. But that really wouldn't be possible if we hadn't have done something like the corridor plan, where now we have the opportunity to move an existing Marion business, a successful business, started by the Katz brothers and now taken over by the Brown family. Marion Iron is now going to be moving to a new home. When we're talking about improving our industrial capacity and adding jobs, it's forward thinking like that makes that stuff happen. Saying no doesn't get us anywhere.
Thank you, Mr. Adamson. Mr. Hogan.
Granted, we have the Marion Enterprise Center, but we need to be a little bit more aggressive in our desire to bring more industry in. Just sitting on the computer and sending things out on the computer isn't the same as going out and knocking on the door, face-to-face meeting. You know, Mayor Canny in Cedar Rapids brought a lot of industry in on the personal touch. And I think that's what Marion needs to do to improve the industrial growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Ms. Pizzuto.
When I was in the Navy, I was stationed in southeast Georgia. And one of the big industries of the area was Weyerhaeuser. And with the amount of weather that was down there and the humidity, that smoke used to just hang. And that's not what we want in Marion. We want clean industry and industry that will bring in good people to pay the taxes that we're all paying now. Clean industry.
Thank you, Ms. Pazur. Well, the next question kind of continues this vein. What is your attitude toward the relocation of Marion Iron Works? And we will start with Mr. Spinks.
Yeah, when I heard of this last week, that was one of the things that we had been talking about since I got elected on council. I know the first 2 months that I was on council, that was the talk about the 7th Avenue corridor. And what I see it coming about now is that they're wanting to move, and not only just to move, but we have developers that want to go into that place. There's people that want to be at that location. And so I think that's a wonderful thing, but it takes planning. Like Craig said, Marion is very much a planning city. We plan things out, and a lot of these plans take 5 or 6 years to come about. So I'm very pleased that planning has made this a reality.
Thank you, Mr. Spinks. Mr. Adamson.
I'm going to bring my own microphone.
Well, first of all, we're just very fortunate that Marion Iron has continued to grow and prosper over the years. Not having lived in Marion for 100 years myself, as it's often told, Marion Iron was on the edge of town once upon a time. And it's not that way anymore. It's right in the middle where a lot of things are going on. And that's not what they want. That wasn't good for their business, but they still needed an open door to walk through to get themselves in position to continue to be successful. With the city working with the Brown family, working with private developers, we were able to find a solution. And it sounds like it's going to work great for them. And it's going to be an opportunity to now take what we call a brownfield spot, or a place that's got some light contamination, fix that up, clean it up, and turn it into millions of dollars worth of other commercial property that's more appropriate for the middle of the city of Marion. So I'm very excited and think there's other opportunities out there.
Thank you, Mr. Adamson. Mr. Hogan.
During the council's work session on Tuesday, it was mentioned that it's going to cost $3.7 to $3.8 million to move Marion Iron. Where's that money coming from? The cleanup, where's that money going to be coming from? Those are questions that need to be answered before we make this big applause that this is going to happen. Granted, there's an industry that needs to move because they're strapped, but how are we going to pay for it?
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Ms. Pazur.
Well, the relocation of Marion Iron by the Brown family will really show up the brown fields. No relation. The problem with these brown fields is that that's where the railroad roundhouse was located. And although I was not around when the roundhouse was there, there was a lot of contaminants, and then also with, as a junkyard, there is a lot of refrigerant in the soil. There is a lot of oil, gas, whatever. It is going to be costly to replace the soil that's there, and perhaps not get too crazy about building things on it.
Thank you, Ms. Pazur. Mr. Swearingen.
When 31st Street was expanded to have a larger turn corner there, my 80-year-old neighbors were kicked out of their house and told to move elsewhere. I think we need to be very careful about moving businesses and making decisions that don't have those businesses' input into them. I think a lot of the central corridor planning is going to help out those new businesses that come on 6th Avenue at the detriment of those existing businesses that we have. We need to create a strategy to improve all of the businesses in Marion, not just some of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swearingen. All right, the next question relates to concerns about revenue and growth. And this question will start with Mr. Adamson. The question is, obviously Marion is on a growth trajectory that is fast-paced. What specific ideas do you have for revenue streams to help keep up with infrastructure, services, etc.?
Well, while it's probably not a very sexy way of answering this question, the work that we've done already in investing the current local option sales tax dollars and expanding our sewer capacity, as well as the expansion of Tower Terrace Road to the north of the city, work that's being done on Blair's Ferry, and presumably the work on South 11th will be done before the end of my lifetime. But major investment in streets in Marion is what drives business growth, because businesses see that we're investing in infrastructure. They see we have a plan in place, and they will come, as this saying goes, for the field of dreams. If you build it, they will come. But it's building and investing in the things that aren't pretty. It's investing in streets and sewers that are underground that you can't see, but that's what's going to pay the future bills.
Thank you, Mr. Adamson. Mr. Hogan.
Well, definitely our infrastructure needs to keep up with our growth. And South 11th is a good example. Right now, they're probably stuck in the mud because of the conditions of the weather. But with our growth in that, our industry coming in, that's going to help drive us and continue to help pay for some of these items we need. Who knows? We may not have the local option sales tax after this election. And when it expires on the 14, we're going to have to find other ways to come up with money. And being a fiscal responsible government, that's what we're going to need. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Ms. Pazor?
Well, the revenue and growth, it kind of is, that's a difficult thing to say. Infrastructure has got to be improved. The streets have got to be improved. And probably local option sales tax would be the biggest improver. Hopefully it will pass as long as what it's meant to be spent on is what is spent on. I really can't address this because I don't know what the growth is going to be. I'm not familiar with Medco, the development company, and what they're doing, what their plans are. So once again, it comes back to what kind of industry is coming in, and I don't know. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Pazor. Mr. Swearingen.
I think that we have to make decisions that are going to ensure the growth that's going to be there. If we don't have the local option sales tax, that's going to put a big kink in trying to be able to fund a lot of these projects that have been put out there. I think we have to be very careful as a council not to overstep and try to do too many things at once and get yourself into a situation where you can't pay for the things that you've already made plans for. So I think we need to take another look at the planning, what we're looking to build, and can we really afford it, and not base that upon money that may or may not be there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swearingen. Mr. Spinks.
Yeah, one of the things that has helped us as far as making Marion grow is having a plan A couple of years ago, we created the comprehensive plan. Tom finished that, and that outlines a way that we are going to grow. Investment in Uptown. You're seeing that now with 2 buildings being built. Planned areas. Did you know that we have a planned community area? It's called the Villages of Indian Creek. There was a document that was created that says how that area will be laid out. Infrastructure, there's a $3 million sewer project that's going on right now. It's part of a $10 million total sewer project that you will never see. But that's things that grow, that allow Marion to continue. And the roads, the 35th Street extension and water wells. You know, we're building water wells. Seems like every week we're drilling another one. So Marion is on the move, and I'm proud of it.
Thank you, Mr. Spinks. Okay, the next question is continuing this theme of infrastructure. Do you agree with this, and planning also, do you agree with the city's long-range street plans to disrupt existing businesses for 3 roundabouts and force heavy truck traffic past our library? And Mr. Hogan, you get to start this one.
I'm definitely not in favor of that. Let's face it, right now, 7th Avenue is 4 lanes in each, or 2 lanes in each direction at 9th Street, or 10th Street going west. From 10th Street going east, it shrinks down to 1 lane for 3 blocks. There's 20,000 cars or better going on that street per day. How are we going to move 20,000 cars on a road that has 1 lane in each direction? Roundabouts where kids are going to school? No. The council did approve a roundabout on 10th Street at Tower Terrace for the same reason, is because the assistant city engineer said it wasn't safe for pedestrians. Let's rethink this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hogan. Ms. Pizort.
The idea of roundabouts just scares the living daylights out of me. Mainly because, first of all, semis don't bend. Emergency vehicles like fire engines don't bend. School buses don't bend. And watching these vehicles just make a simple turn to the left or to the right, no, it doesn't work. When you have an emergency vehicle behind you and you hear it, what are you supposed to do? Pull to the right and stop. On a roundabout, you can't do that. Mr. Adamson gave the solution that you just keep going until you can pull off. Well, that's not a solution. In fact, it's kind of like anti-legal. I don't think roundabouts in an already established neighborhood is a good idea. The ones out of town, fine, let them build around it, but not in an established neighborhood.
Thank you, Ms. Pizort. Mr. Swearingen.
I, too, am opposed to the roundabouts, especially one on 15th Street that would be going onto the route to Marion High School. Trying to put semi-traffic onto 6th Avenue, especially with the new brick streets that they have there. Those brick streets were put in last year and they're already crumbling. What are they going to look like after trucks start coming on there? It's not going to be pretty. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swearingen. Mr. Spinks.
Yeah, the traffic on 7th Avenue is already overloaded. And the reason it is that people are turning there. The turn lanes into the businesses are located very close together. And so therefore you get people turning left on top of each other. And just about every week night that I go home, you'll see a very close call, if not an accident on that. So something had to be done, and that something was to move over to 6th Avenue and then take some of the flow off of 7th Avenue. Now, as far as roundabouts, I have to tell you, when that first came up, I was the biggest opposer of that. But I've changed my mind on it, and one of the things that I just saw is go look at the Mythbusters YouTube video, and it shows that the four-way intersection in 15 minutes handled 350 cars, and a roundabout handled 480 cars. So roundabouts move a lot of traffic.
Thank you, Mr. Spinks. Mr. Adamson.
Obviously, everybody here lives in Marion, so I don't know about you, but it seems like in a lot of cases, stop signs seem to be a little bit optional in our town. So I kind of think roundabouts are a great solution, just because if everybody wants to just keep driving, this is a way to do that without having to stop. But you know, this is part of the education process for each of you. They're not difficult. They're not dangerous. If you think those things, then take a drive around the ones that we have right now. There's a lot of people that love to throw out all kinds of crazy talk, but not back it up with any sort of statistics or basis in fact. Roundabouts work, which is why Joe's statistic is so impressive. We don't have to stop. We can keep moving. If a fire truck comes up behind you, you drive on through, and then you pull over. It's not illegal, and it works. It's just the way it is.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Adamson. We're going to take a break from infrastructure for a minute. This relates to taxes. How would you create a balance between residential and industrial property? And I'm assuming that's for tax purposes. And for this one, Ms. Pazur, would you begin?
Well, I know that there was a rollback on the residential, and I don't know what it is right now. And that industrial and commercial were paying 100% of their assessed valuation. I don't know how to answer this question. I think you really need somebody who is conversant in taxes and math right now. Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Pazur. Mr. Swearingen.
Well, the industrial taxes, as Mary Lou said, would be higher paid. But again, I don't know what that breakdown is going to be or what that kind of split would be. Yeah, I don't have that information. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swearingen. Mr. Spinks?
Well, this goes back to the balance that I talked about earlier, the balance of residential and industry. And the state has been thinking about moving the industry and commercial tax rate down. And so communities like Hiawatha that are very much dependent upon industrial type revenue and not a lot of residential, they're going to see a big hit on that if the state goes through with that. And so that's why having a combined residential and industrial 50-50 split is so important. And I think that's what Marion is trying to do. And the Economic Center is doing it, and also attracting business along the 7th Avenue corridor. You look at like CVS, just built the Linn Area Bank, and also the Come and Go that's going there. So we see 7th Avenue starting to be built, and that's the way we do that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Spinks. Mr. Adamson?
Well, we've been looking at this situation for quite a long time, and the big thing that I guess the big idea, if you want to call it that we've come to is the fact that we can't just be residentially dependent. We are unbelievably fortunate to have 2 great school districts, but in a way, it kind of hurts us because more and more people want to move to Marion. So one of the jobs of the council is to work with the development community to get the infrastructure in place so that we can attract more businesses to help balance out all the people who are moving here. The other thing that we've got going for us, and this also relates to the schools, we have the right demographics. We have smart people who have good jobs and make a lot of money, and they like to spend that money here locally. That means there's lots of places looking for educated workers, and a lot of retail businesses looking for dedicated shoppers. And we have a great combination of both. And that's the appeal of Marion.
Thank you, Mr. Adamson. Mr. Hogan?
Well, it'd be nice to get a balance between the residential and commercial. That is a fact. One way we can ensure that we're going to have more commercial growth is to look at some of these fees, like our stormwater fees, which put a big hit on a new development of commercial property. Thank goodness the council finally realized that they needed to have a cap on it, and only $133 a month for places like Linn schools. In order to be successful, the city needs to get its finances in line. And if we have to bite the bullet, we bite the bullet. But we also need to give our commercial property a break. 100% every year is a lot of money. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. This relates to the future as well.
Can I make a
and-
point of clarification that the State House sets the tax rates?
Thank you for that comment. If you didn't hear that, it's the State House that sets the tax rates. Okay, so looking at the future, and each candidate may have already addressed some of these in previous remarks, but what improvements need to be made in Marion to accommodate the growing population? And Mr. Swearingen, we'll start with you for this.
I think probably the biggest thing that's going to have to improve is the traffic flow. We've been talking about 6th Avenue. I think 8th Avenue is also a big problem. We had 15,000 to 18,000 cars on 8th Avenue every day prior to Blairsbury being closed down, and that number is way up right now. I live along that route, and trying to turn onto 8th Avenue or go across 8th Avenue is a pretty daunting task. I would propose that we would make a turning lane on 8th Avenue all the way from the corner at Lindale Drive to 10th Street. We have part of that is left turn lane right now, and I think that can be done without a lot of disruption because 8th Avenue is already widened for parking, which isn't really used. We also need to work on the traffic going out east of town. A lot of times people will have to stop at all the lights there. I think instead of a sensor light, we should be going to a timer light instead.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Swearingen. Mr. Spinks?
Yeah, the improvements for a growing population. The city staff has a really good crystal ball, and so they are very good at looking at this. One of those things that they're looking at, of course, is the Tower Terrace Road, and that is a corridor that will go from Marion all the way over to Hiawatha and connect Marion to the Interstate 380. The water, like I mentioned earlier, Todd's drilling wells every day. Thank you, Todd. And the sewer improvement that I talked about, that's something that's hidden. But if you notice that when Hiawatha did their local option money, they had that part of their planning now, and we've almost got it completed. So, and also planned communities. I can't say enough about how nice it is for the developers to come in and have a community that is already planned out for residential, commercial, and the roads. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spinks. Mr. Adamson?
Well, I believe we have been thinking ahead. We've got the expansion of Tower Terrace Road, and Marion's already completed a couple sections of it, and the other communities haven't even really gotten started. The only way we're going to get an interchange at 380 in Hiawatha is for Marion to get its part built out, and if nobody else does, too bad. We'll have a bunch of commercial development out there, and those other communities can mess around for as long as they want. In the meantime, we're repairing Blairsbury intersection. We've repaired McGowan, extended 31st Street, 35th Street, repaired 10th Street, We're also looking at an extension for Alburnett Road. We've also had some pretty good success with the bypass for Highway 100. I think all those things are great and we're moving in the right direction. But it's not just about roads. In order to get businesses to move here, in order to get people to want to live in Marion, we also need to continue to partner with our schools. That's a huge driver for the city of Marion. In addition, we need to spend money on our parks, which means trails, and also our library.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Adamson. Mr. Hogan?
Well, everybody said infrastructure, and you can't disagree with that. But also our residential streets need some attention as well. If you're running on a bumpy road to get to a main road, that's rough. But again, it's great that we have Tower Terrace going in, but further to the north, we got to think about County Home Road as well, because that's where Marion is growing. We're growing to the north and east. And sooner or later, Linn County Road is going to be another acquisition the city's going to have to deal with. We need to make sure we get our roads completed. We need to get more commercial development in here to make things happen.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Ms. Pizzort?
Well, it's taken Marion 174 years to get to this point, and it's kind of difficult to all of a sudden, in up to even 10 years, correct the errors that were made, such as neighborhoods without storm sewers, without proper drainage, without proper streets that have broken up since. And one thing that we have really going is a department which really watches out for the base of these new streets, the depth of the concrete that is used, and there's no compromise. It's our way or the highway, so to speak. It's difficult to say that what is going to happen for the increased population. Streets, sewers, the stuff underground.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Pizzort. Well, this is revisiting a theme we had about attracting new industry. You all talked about the desire for new industry. What are the key ingredients to attracting these industries? And for this, we'll start with Mr. Spinks.
One of the things I think one of the other council persons said is that the key to attracting them is to offer them something. And that offering a lot of times comes in as tax increment financing, which gives them like property tax relief for some period of time, 5 to 10 years. That gives them a break on the property taxes that they have to pay. And that's one of the mechanisms that Marion has. And we use that very much on the properties that are being built. The Lincoln Square properties where you see the CVS pharmacy, and the E-Plus company that's coming out. You have to give them some incentive to get them to locate here. But by giving them incentives, it also, by the end of that 10 years, we have reaped much more money back than we've given to them in taxes. So it's a give and then a take, if you will.
Thank you, Mr. Spinks. Mr. Adamson.
Well, the key ingredients come not only from the city, but other partners with the city. So I think your number one item is an educated workforce and a reliable workforce. One of the things the city just recently did is work with the local transportation group to make sure that there's appropriate busing to work on second and third shifts for various businesses in Marion, or Marion residents being able to get to other parts of the metro to hold down jobs, which obviously benefits us. But again, talking about these key ingredients, it's an educated workforce, it's good schools for our kids, which that's what our school districts are providing. And we've also got to provide lifestyle opportunities. Now, that may seem odd to some of us who are used to walking to school or walking to the grocery store and stuff like that. But now part of that ingredient is trails, a good library, a walkable downtown, and things like music in the park, which is provided by the chamber and other entities that the city doesn't have anything to do with.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Adamson. Mr. Hogan?
Well, again, TIFs are nice to give to draw in industry, but we also have fees, the stormwater fees. We got to keep them as low as we can, because that's a double whammy for anybody coming in. Granted, we have two of the best school districts in the state, and they're probably the city's biggest asset we have. Entertainment, the amphitheater at Lau Park will be a nice draw. So there are some things that the city is drawing industry in. We just need to continue it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hogan. Ms. Pizzori?
The city has an industrial area that is shovel-ready. The streets are in, the sewers are in, all the amenities are in, so they can say to a company, hey, we're ready for you to build. The problem with TIFs is a company applying for TIF when actually you don't fall within the purview of what is allowable by a TIF. And the city has to be careful about that, because it's real easy to give away money when you don't have it. Things are not functioning tonight, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Pizzori. Mr. Swearingen?
I think some of the biggest things that businesses need to be able to move in is they need to be able to not only have a place for the business to be, they need to be able to move their goods out into the world, and they need to have a workforce that's ready to go in there. Schools are going to be part of that. Streets are going to be able to get us those goods to where they need to go, and the sewer systems and the other amenities, power systems that we're going to get out there, those are going to be helpful in attracting industry and commercial and other businesses to our town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swearingen. Here's one of these imagine if you are able to do one thing consistent with your campaign the first day on city council, what would that be? And we'll start with Mr. Adamson.
Well, since I'm the current at-large council holder, and apparently everything we've been doing has been really good according to the other people that have been speaking tonight, other than having some streets that are falling apart, and maybe they should check out some of the streets that are really good until we can get a chance to get to those. But in the meantime, a lot of this is just about being able to work with other people and being able to look at things for the long term, what's in the best interest of the entire city, all the residents, not just one person or two people or the person that yells the loudest. That's not what governing is about. So it's working with others, it's working with the business community, it's working on opportunities that come our way because we have the Enterprise Center, because we've got Marion Iron relocating to a new spot. We're in a great spot right now. You should be very pleased that you're a resident of the city of Marion. We got a lot going for us.
Thank you, Mr. Adamson. Mr. Hogan.
Well, if elected, the first thing I would want to do would be go out and introduce myself to all the departments. In other words, get a chance to see what they're all about. Spend some time with them. Communication. Communication is also listening as well as speaking. And I think we need to incorporate the council with the staff and then also with the public. We need to have a good communication with the city council to the businesses, property owners, commercial property owners, and such. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Ms. Pazur.
The first day, I would re-erect a sign that was in Marion on the east end for many years. And it was, if you lived in Marion, you'd be home. And I really think that that was the most welcoming thing that anybody could probably have at the entrances to Marion. If you lived in Marion, you'd be home.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Pazur. Mr. Swearingen.
On my first day, I'd like to make sure the council is asking questions that perhaps they haven't been asking up to this point. Questions like why we're giving gas allowances to people who are mostly just coming into work and not really needing their cars for going out and driving into public areas. Also, why we're giving 4% raises to our top salaried employees while we're capping out our police and fire departments at 2.5%. I find it kind of odd that Mr. Adamson says that he's going to work with all the other members when on the day that Mayor Buska was elected, he had gone to KCRG with another council member and said that he could not work with him. That
I
seems
think you might be misquoting me, Ron. I'd be interested in hearing that again.
What did you say to KCRG then?
I don't know. I don't recall right off the top of my head. I didn't realize that was going to be part of the quiz.
Excuse me, gentlemen. We'll save that discussion for after the debate, please, for Mr. Spinks. It's your turn.
Since this is a what-if question, I think I would like to call everyone in Marion and ask them what they want. You know, a lot of times it's very hard on council to know what people want in Marion. And so the way we do that is with surveys. We did a survey in 2011, and we just got that, we just went back over that because there's a new survey being planned to come out very shortly. And so it's very hard a lot of times. You feel like you're in a vacuum of what to do. But, you know, I go around and look at, you know, what needs to be done. And the city, the staff is just outstanding. Like I said, they have a great crystal ball of knowing which way to plan. And so, but I would like to know what people want. And so on my first day, that's what I would like, to be able to get on the call and not be a robocaller. Just be what do you want?
All right, thank you, Mr. Spinks.
Right.
Joe, line out between 1 and 2.
This regards citizen involvement, which I'm sure we're all interested in because we're here. Council can lead by doing or encouraging others to do something. What would you encourage Marion residents to do other than to vote? And for this question, we'll start with Mr. Hogan.
Get involved. Attend a council meeting, or 2, or 3, or 4. But get involved in your community. We need citizens' input. And we need a council that's going to listen and not criticize or name call people. You know, everybody's got an opinion, whether you agree with it or not. But the biggest thing in communications is also listening. And our council needs to listen to our citizens, and our citizens need to get involved with our city.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Ms. Pazur.
Well, I agree with the idea of the getting involved as far as council meetings and committees, so that you understand the inner workings of things. When I first ran, the very first time, it was because the South Side seemed to get all the sidewalks and the additional costs that they took. And I said, what they need is, let's be fair about this. Because I didn't understand the workings. And after understanding, then it gets a little easier to understand why the council does what it does. But you have to be a part of it, and you have to be a member, not only of the audience, but a participant.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Pazur. Mr. Swearingen.
I think council meetings are very enlightening. That's a great experience to go to and find out what's going on in your community. I think we have a lot of great clubs here in Marion. That sign that Mary Lou talked about used to have a list of a lot of the volunteer groups that we have in town. They had the Kiwanis on there, the Lions Club. I don't remember who else was on there, but there were a lot of them that sponsored that sign. So get involved with the volunteer groups in your community, like the American Legion, which I'm a member of. Get involved with your church and help out in the community that way. We have a lot of things that you can do. We're a community, and that means getting together and doing things. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swearingen. Mr. Spinks.
Well, there's two members here that came to council that wanted to fill a position when Mr. Starks left. And the first thing that I asked both of them was, have you been to a council meeting? And if you haven't, why haven't you? And they can both attest that was the first thing that I asked them. But that means be involved. You have to know what's going on in Marion. And the mayor has a list, okay? He has a list of positions that are needed in Marion. There's positions for like the Planning and Zoning Board. There's the Parks Board. And there's many others. So the mayor has a list. If you want to do something for Marion, besides doing voting, there's a position there that I guarantee you could fill and that you would enjoy it. You would enjoy doing one of these things. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spinks. Mr. Adamson.
Well, besides the mayor and Santa Claus, there's other people that have lists. Your pastors, your priests, your superintendents at school, your school board, PTOs. There's all kinds of local groups, national groups, international groups, Rotary, Kiwanis, Lions, Eagles, American Legion. There's all kinds of groups who are looking for motivated people who care about their community that want to be involved. It's really not that hard. Marion is, I think, a pretty welcoming community. So if you have any interest, it's available to you. It's just a matter of deciding what your passion is. If you're not passionate about it, don't do it. There's other things that you can do, and you'll stay out of people's way who are motivated to make positive changes with those groups they're affiliated with.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Adamson. The person who wrote this question has some interest or concerns of historic preservation. What are or what would be your plans, if any, for the tearing down of historical buildings for more trees and parking lots? And we'll start with Ms. Pazur.
Well, historic preservation has always been one of my favorite subjects. And I was on the first committee for the Main Street project. And unfortunately, we did not end up as the winner of that first year because of a historic house that was torn down to make way for a drive-in bank. And I'm not going to mention which drive-in bank it was. But anyway, older places, you go to Europe to look at the old places. You go to the East Coast to look at the old places. We've got old places, and it does not include my house, by the way. I'm definitely for enhancing and improving, not destroying and just tearing down. And parking lots, trees definitely, but keep the history and improve on it.
Thank you, Ms. Pazur. Mr. Swearingen.
I'm a member of the Marion Christian Church, and our old building used to be on the corner of 10th Street and 8th Avenue. I think it was the oldest church in town when it was torn down, and I was sad to see it go. You have to kind of look at those projects and see if those buildings have been well maintained, if they're worth saving. I think that we should try to save those buildings. But you also have to be able to look to the future and see the needs of the community. So it's going to take a balancing act to create history and the future. I think the brick streets that we have in town, I think they're kind of an anachronism. They don't hold up well. I think they're Marion's version of off-roading. So I think we can do away with those. If you want to brick cross streets, or brick crosswalk, like they do at the Indianapolis 500, keep that, but you got to be able to move forward as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swearingen. Mr. Spinks.
One of the things that the council did a few years ago was they changed the time of approval for a tear-down permit. And they did that for the historical district to keep someone from coming in and tearing down a building before we would have time to react. And so that's one of the planning ahead things that was done. One of the things we did on Pucker Street, as you know, 8th Avenue, is that there was a house that had gone into receivership, and the council, Marion, put a roof on it to preserve it. So we're very much proactive of that. And I know Mr. Draper would shoot us all if we even thought about doing something to the depot. The depot is a wonderful asset to Marion. And it's, if you ever go up to the city park for the music in the parks, it's just a wonderful place. And everyone that comes to those parks, to the city park, enjoys that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Spinks. Mr. Adamson.
Well, I had been awaiting that question when I saw Mr. Draper arrive, so although I'm sure it didn't come from him, it must have been somebody else. One of the things I think the city has done a good job of over the years as we've expanded our planning department is one of the staff members, Dave Hockett, has taken a very big interest in historic preservation, has worked hard to expand the Historic Preservation Committee, as well as the rules. I've talked with him extensively about that because I have a soft spot, especially for the Carnegie Library that's here in town. I don't know where that fits in the plans of Marion, but it's sure my hope that we can either continue having that as part of the church or turn it into a business or something like that once they move to their new location. But I think Marion has shown a good commitment to that and recognizes some of our mistakes of the past of tearing down some old buildings, especially in the uptown area.
Thank you, Mr. Adamson. Mr. Hogan.
I'm against any tearing down of historical buildings or even the wall at City Square Park. It looks great now that it's been rehabbed, and that is one thing that I'm really proud of that did occur on the 6th Avenue portion of the Central Corridor. The depot, that was a great community project, and the organization that went through and the people that worked on it was a total community effort. And Mr. Draper was the guiding force behind it. So we need to keep our history.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Hogan. All right, this question relates to, I guess, quality of life in Marion. What new ideas do you have to make our streets more walkable and more bikeable? And for this, we'll start with Mr. Swearingen.
Well, we used to have a bike path along 8th Avenue, and I'm not sure why that was ever taken out. I always thought that was a good idea to have extra room for the bikers on that side of the road. I think we're building a lot more bike trails, so that's going to give them areas to go to. And the pedestrian traffic is going to need some help too, especially downtown, that we're going to need to see. So we've got some work to do, and there's going to need to be some planning on how we're going to be doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swearingen. Mr. Spinks.
Well, one of the things that's going on in Marion right now is a walking trail, biking trail development. We just were awarded some money, I believe it was $2.5 million from the area council to develop a trail. And what you're going to see is a trail from out by Menards that's going to go over to Highway 13. That's one of the new developments. If you've noticed that the trail that comes from Lindale Drive across there is now it's hard surface gravel, but we just started looking at having that trail being paved. So that's another commitment that we have. One of the things that you find in Marion, we live along 29th Avenue, and people come by our house at 1 o'clock in the morning walking. I don't know where on earth they're going, but the trails and sidewalks of Marion are used, and so we have to make sure that they are kept up and going.
Thank you, Mr. Spinks. Mr. Adamson.
Well, the City Council over the past several years has made a greater commitment to something called complete streets, meaning actually building out our major streets to make sure that there are places for walking and biking along with driving. So I think we're well on our way there. Probably the bigger thing that we've done is developing a comprehensive trails plan that integrates the current trails with the other metro trails, as well as trying to marry those up with our various parks around town. And then lastly, integrating that with the Uptown District. So being able to ride your bike from one side of Marion to the other and stop in the Uptown area to grab a glass of wine, or have a visit to the art gallery, or to have a sandwich, or whatever you want to do, there's going to be plenty of opportunities to do that.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Adamson. Mr. Hogan.
One thing the council has done is they've created a committee for sidewalks, and they're going into some of our older neighborhoods where there aren't any sidewalks, and they're building sidewalks in there to ease people from walking on streets, which is a great idea. You know, I would like to see maybe a bicycle safety course offered to these young kids as they learn to ride a bicycle, so they can be safe out there on the roads with cars. In a lot of places we don't have bike trails. And also realize that when they're riding on the sidewalk, they need to yield to the pedestrians as well. I think our developments are putting in bigger sidewalks. There's more lighting in the newer developments than in some of our older neighborhoods. So I think our quality of life is getting better and better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Ms. Pazur.
Well, don't let those kids have their glass of wine and ride their bikes, because they're enough of a hazard as it is. The population of Marion is older than probably a lot of places, and the one thing that kind of bothers me is that in some of these designs, it's almost looking at the Piedmont, Iowa City, and the college towns, which Marion is not. And I can't think of too many people who ride bikes. They're like in their 60s and 70s. I admire them if they can do it. And also just walking. I admire those people that can just walk also. But they need an area to move, walking, biking, whatever, lost my thought.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Pazur. Okay, before we move on to our closing statements, I want to thank you, the audience, for your civility this evening. And I'd also like to thank Kirkwood Community College for this facility. We will do closing statements now. Each candidate will have 2 minutes. We'll go in the reverse order, the opening statements, which means, Mr. Spinks, you may begin.
Oh, boy. Well, again, thank you all for coming out tonight. I want to start off by talking about the comprehensive plan. You know, when we started on council, that plan was over 10 years old. And, you know, that plan should never be more than a couple of years old. It shouldn't get that old. And so I look forward to working on another one. The 29th Avenue Community Plan, like I said, the Villages of Indian Creek, that was the first planned community that we had in Marion. And that was very exciting. They talked about shovel-ready projects. Before that was the buzzword, we had those. I believe it was about 5 years ago that when President Obama came in and he had that money that was given to communities for to work. We had 4 of those projects, and one of those projects that you see has corn growing in it now. And that's the 35th Street extension with the roundabout. That was done because we saw a need for access to like Hunter's Ridge and the northern areas of Marion for the fire department. You know, that was one of the reasons for building that. And it allowed us to get away without having to build a 3rd fire station, which is planned. That is in the planning. The first phase of the downtown development, the changes you've seen, it's just amazing. And some of the things that were mentioned about the brick streets, we will fix those. I mean, we formulate a plan and we will fix those. The citizen survey, I'm looking forward to coming out and seeing what's important. The local option money that's been spent, the roads have improved with that. The park expansion, the Lau Park, get out and take a look at that. And like I've said at the beginning, with our mission statement, you know, we pride ourselves in offering cost-effective governance.
Thank you, Mr. Spinks. Mr. Swearingen.
I'd like to thank you all for having me here this evening. I think that what we're going to need to look at here in the next few years is common sense approaches to the problems that we're going to be facing. Marion obviously has a lot of things that are going well for it. The fact that we're increasing the population by 30% each of the last 2 decades, it says that we're doing a lot of things right. We're building the amphitheater out at Lau Park, and I think the council did a great job of trying to keep costs down on that project. We're working to try to have more recycling come out of our waste products and bring costs down that way. Fees and taxes are things that we just need to get to work on. We need to make some better decisions. Again, I have to point to the brick streets. Those brick streets are going to cost an additional $30,000 to $60,000 in maintenance each year because they have to have a special kind of salt. They have to have a special plow to plow those streets, and you know, those streets are crumbling after 1 year. They're not going to make it. So I thank you for the opportunity to speak before you tonight, and I'll have a wonderful night.
Thank you, Mr. Swearingen. Ms. Pazur.
That's okay. My late mama used to remind me of the retired and elderly who are on fixed incomes, and they don't have the luxury of adding to their incomes, but still have to pay the fees and levies. Decisions are being made that are costing you, the taxpayer, precious dollars that are not in your best interest. We have it's called urban forest fee that is in the water bill. And there is no sunset as far as this is concerned. And my understanding when this was formulated was that this was to remove the trees that were infested by the emerald ash borer. and it was the ash trees, obviously, and to replace them. Well, they just took $75,000 out of that fund to go into road use tax. I would like to see more, a closer eye kept on the various fees and things, and this is why I think people have a question about the local option sales tax. Will the things that are in place to be done get done, or will it be loaned out to other areas? The new bricks streets already need repair. Ron is right on that. Removal of the delivery street behind the 7th Avenue Mall so that businesses can no longer receive their supplies easily. They have to park on the street, and these are semis. A capital project, the police station, that was not available for a vote by the taxpayers. We can do better. We need more of a transparent government, and we need to be more fiscally responsible. Thanks for having this forum.
Thank you, Ms. Pazur. Mr. Hogan.
Yes, thank you. I want to thank again the League of Women Voters for having me here, and I thank all of you who are in attendance. Again, my name is Dwight Hogan. I'm running to represent the people of Marion on the City Council because I believe we must show more fiscal restraint with our city budget and spending practices. I believe also we must have transparency in our government, and we must seek input from our residents, property owners, business owners, and the action of the council must reflect the will of the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Mr. Adamson.
I think we learned a lot tonight. Unfortunately, there are some things that were a little sad to see and hear. That was certainly a surprise to me. But I think we also need to focus on what's great that's going on and the people who are capable of leading us there. Sorry, I'm just thinking about some things here. We've got plenty of transparency. The books are open. We've got plenty of opportunities, and some people just can't see them. That's the difference between voting for me and voting for none of the above. The work's going to be a little harder this year, because if you're interested in voting for me, you're going to have to write in my name. That means you got to turn in your absentee ballot. It means you got to go to the polls. And in the at-large space, you got to write in Craig Adamson. I've got the experience. I've got the financial acumen. I understand the finances and tax aspects. That's what I do for a living. I don't manage the city. I'm not a city manager. But I advise clients on a daily basis on all types of financial matters, including their budgets. So I understand people who are on fixed incomes, as well as those who have more than maybe some of the rest. Marion's got too many good things going on. We got to keep this train rolling. It's for all of our benefits. If we don't continue to focus on adding businesses and doing things that help our school districts, that impacts your property value. If you want to have a home that's worth more, if you want to have a business that's more valuable, then you need to vote for people that can help move this city forward. Please write in Craig Adamson at the at-large. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Adamson. Again, thank you for attending. Remember to vote on November 5th, and please join me in thanking all of the candidates.
Council meetings.
Yeah, he does make comments.
An opinion.
Yeah.
Concept. That's pretty interesting.
This is